Hi, I'm Angela. I gave 27 years to a man who stood beside me in church, then stood over me in a room full of our people and called me a parasite, said I was just some woman who never earned her keep. But what hurt most wasn't his words. It was how long I let myself believe I was lucky to have him. How many things did he take while I stayed silent? And why did it take a room full of strangers to finally hear my name? The laughter in Keisha's living room bounced off the walls like it had somewhere to be. I sat in the corner of the sectional, hands folded on my lap, the only one not holding a glass of champagne. Balloons hovered above us, gold and pink. "Happy birthday, Keisha," spelled in bold letters. It was her 38th, and the whole family showed up for her, just like they always did when the cameras were out and the neighbors might see. I wore the same dress I used to wear during my night shifts at the hospital. The stitching on the collar was starting to come loose, but nobody noticed. Nobody ever noticed. Keisha was across the room, radiant in a sleek suit, laughing with her brother, Malik. My husband Darnell stood by the fireplace, talking loud enough for everyone to hear, as usual. Every now and then, I tried to add a word or two to a conversation. Back when "Oh, Mama," Keisha interrupted without even turning her head. "Can you hand me that napkin?" So I did. I always did. My smile sat on my face like it knew its place, but inside, something long dormant stirred. I watched them all, my children, my husband, my life, moving around me like I was just part of the furniture. My body was there. My soul. Maybe not. The clink of glasses pulled me back. "Mama, say a few words," someone said. Darnell smirked. I stood slowly, holding my cup of ginger ale, cleared my throat, and opened my mouth. But before a word escaped, Darnell cut in with that voice he saved for public shows. "Let's not forget," he chuckled, waving his glass, "who's been riding free for 27 years. Silence. Like someone turned the music off. My mouth stayed open, my words stuck mid-breath. Keisha stared at her nails. Malik scrolled his phone. A cousin gave a weak laugh, then covered her mouth. My knees trembled, but I didn't sit. Not yet. I remembered every night I left the hospital with aching feet and a bag of groceries. Every shift I picked up to pay tuition, every dollar I saved so they could smile while I stayed tired. Parasite. That word didn't belong to me, it belonged to him, the man who used to preach about grace but had none for me. My mind drifted, back 27 years. Darnell had just lost his church, said they pushed him out. Politics, he told folks. But I knew the truth, his temper, his pride. We had 2 kids, a mortgage, and bills piling up like autumn leaves. I picked up double shifts at Grady Hospital. Mornings, nights, weekends. My body ran on coffee and prayer. When we couldn't make the house note, I took off my wedding ring, silver with a small stone, and sold it to the pawn shop on Ashby Street. "Your cousin sent that check?" he asked one day. I nodded, let him keep his pride. That was the day I started disappearing. Years went by. Malik needed braces. Keisha got into Spelman, then law school. I worked overtime, took side jobs sewing for nurses, cooked bulk meals on Sundays to stretch the week. Some nights, I walked to work because the gas tank was dry. They thought Daddy was the provider. I never said otherwise. One night, after finishing Keisha's tuition payment, I skipped dinner and sat on the edge of my bed sewing up the hem of my uniform. The air was so still I could hear my heartbeat. A real mother sacrifices, I told myself. But at what cost? Back in the bathroom at Keisha's house, I stared at the mirror. "Parasite?" I whispered. My reflection stared back, eyes not quite mine. Behind them, I heard her, the young woman I used to be, loud, bold, sharp. She was still there, buried under years of yes and okay. I thought about Keisha, sitting in that bright room, dressed like success. She had no idea what it cost me. I didn't cry. I exhaled. "I won't be invisible anymore," I said, voice low but steady. When I stepped back into the living room, the air hadn't changed, but I had. Darnell laughed at his own joke again. I walked past him, slower than needed, straightened my back. My purse hung off my shoulder like armor. Malik caught my eye. Something flickered in his face. Recognition, maybe, or guilt. I held his gaze a second too long, then turned to Keisha. "I'm heading out," I said. She nodded, confused. "Mama, you okay?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. That was the last time I let them see me shrink. The morning sun crept in slow, barely warming the edge of my kitchen counter. I hadn't slept. My eyes were dry, but my heart, still raw from the night before, refused to let me rest. The words Darnell threw at me had looped in my head like a broken hymn. Riding free for 27 years. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was a sermon he'd been rehearsing. I stood in silence, waiting for the coffee maker to finish its slow drip. That silence, it was thicker than air, decades of it packed into these walls. I stirred my cup, then stood still. This house was mine. Yet somehow, it never felt like it belonged to me. Each room held echoes of who I used to be, who I became, and who I tried so hard to forget. I looked toward the mantel, but didn't walk over. I already knew what was up there. Photos of a man I stood beside, smiled beside, but hadn't truly been beside in years. I thought being quiet meant being strong. That if I kept things calm, it meant I was keeping the family whole. But that peace was laced with sacrifice. And lately, I wondered if I'd just been surrendering. With the sun now lighting the hallway, I grabbed an old broom and opened the hall closet. That door had stuck for years, the kind of stuck that made you ignore it. I was about to clear out old church programs, coats we never wore anymore, but something caught my eye. Way in the back, tucked beneath a box of old hats, was a taped-up carton marked Geneva. I froze. My mama's sister. Gone now, but always honest, always watching. I slid the box out and set it on the dining table. Dust rose like breath from a grave. Inside, folders, receipts, little yellow slips. I picked up the first one, a pawn ticket, my name on it, but I hadn't pawned anything in 2001. Next, bank statements from accounts I didn't even know I had, loans taken out in my name, some stamped delinquent, others paid in full. My hand shook. One receipt dated back to '99, right around the time Darnell started his community project that never made it past the church basement. Each slip was a lie written in ink, backed by my name, my credit, my silence. I sat down slowly, heart hammering like I was still holding my youngest in the ER on a night shift. And then I saw it. An envelope. My name on the front in Aunt Geneva's handwriting. I hadn't seen that script since we buried her 10 years ago. I opened it with care like it might crumble in my hands. "Angela," it began. "I didn't know how to say this when I was alive, but I owe you the truth." The letter spoke of a visit from Darnell, how he asked for a loan and used my name to convince Geneva. She gave it, trusting him because he was family. But later, she had doubts, and she knew me well enough to know. I didn't know. I was scared to tell you, baby. I thought maybe you already knew and chose silence. But if you're reading this now, I guess the truth finally found its way. The last line cut clean. You deserve more than what you've accepted, baby. I pressed the paper to my chest, then laid it gently on the table. My stomach twisted, but my spine, it straightened. I started remembering things, little things that didn't seem like anything back then. Nights I stayed up nursing Darnell through flu, backaches, doubt. Times I put off seeing the doctor just to make sure Malik could go on that school trip he begged for. I never once asked if anybody saw me. I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out an old notepad. I started writing. Skipped surgery, 2005. Paid Keisha's law books, 2008. Sold bracelet mama gave me, 2011. Told them I was fine. Always. The pen moved fast. The memories came faster. We think we remember everything, until the truth writes it in ink. A knock at the door broke the stillness. I slipped the papers back in the envelope, tucked it inside a file folder, and slid it under the placemats. When I opened the door, it was Malik. "Hey, Ma, you good?" he asked, stepping inside. I smiled gently. "You hungry?" He grinned. "You always know." He sat at the table, talking about his new project, some app I didn't understand. He spoke of Darnell like he was a legend, how Dad taught him to be strong, to believe in purpose. I nodded, let him talk. But inside, I saw my old self in his face. The reverence, the belief, the blind spots. I reached for his hand halfway through his story. Sometimes, I said, quiet, the truth don't scream. It waits. He looked at me, puzzled, then kept talking. I let him. I had said enough for now. When he left, I pulled the folder back out, sat at the kitchen table with Aunt Geneva's letter on top. I ran my fingers over her signature, tracing each loop and curve like it could bring her back. This time, I won't bury the truth beneath love. Some debts are never repaid, but they are always remembered. The kitchen clock ticked slow as syrup while I peeled potatoes at the sink. It had been 2 days since Keisha's party, and the house felt like it was holding its breath. I hadn't cooked a real meal in a while, but tonight my hands moved on their own, seasoning chicken, chopping onions, laying out cornbread batter. Not out of love, out of muscle memory, out of the need to make something normal when everything else felt crooked. Darnell sat at the table, newspaper open wide, glasses sliding down his nose. He turned each page with the same rhythm, like the last 40 years hadn't happened. I could smell his cologne across the room, sharp, sweet, familiar, but cold now. He didn't look up, didn't say a word. I glanced at the casserole dish waiting on the counter, the same one Aunt Geneva gave us when we married. The glaze was chipped at the edge, but I still used it. Habit, symbol of what we used to be, or maybe of what I thought we were. I laid the food on the table with care, smoothing the cloth beneath the plates. Darnell folded his paper slowly and finally looked at me. "You went all out," he said flatly. I sat across from him. "It's been a while." We ate in silence for a while, forks scraping, glasses sweating. My heart pounded as I thought of the folder hidden in the guest room, the receipts, the letter from Geneva. I had to know if he'd tell me the truth without me handing it to him. So I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Darnell, I found some old papers. Loans, pawn slips, my name. Geneva's letter." He paused mid-bite. "Angela, that's ancient history. Why are you digging up old drama?" "I just need to understand," I said. He laughed, short and dry. "You were never good with numbers anyway. That's why I handled things. You're making a mountain out of nothing." I stared at him, spoon still in my hand. He went back to eating, as if dismissing me was just another chore. In that moment, I felt something hard settle in my chest. He'd never seen me as his partner, only as his cover, only as his silence. Later that evening, Malik stopped by. He held a plastic container of leftover cake from the party. "Hey, Ma," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Brought you some of Keisha's cake." I smiled faintly. "Thank you, baby. Sit for a minute." He did. We made small talk about work, about the weather. Then I asked, quiet but direct. "Malik, did you ever know about your father's loans? The ones in my name?" He froze. His eyes flicked to the table, then back to me. I heard something years back. Thought Dad had handled it." "You thought I knew," I said, not a question. He nodded slowly. "I didn't want to mess things up between y'all. I figured you were okay with it." I swallowed. My own son. My silence had taught him to believe I was complicit in my own erasure. "I see," I whispered. He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, Ma." I touched his hand. "It's all right," I said, though it wasn't. Sometimes silence raises children just like words do. After he left, I went to my room and pulled a blank notebook from the drawer. It had been sitting there since I retired, empty pages waiting. Tonight, I opened it. I began to write every deception, every time I'd bitten my tongue, every sacrifice I'd folded into a smile. Not for revenge, for clarity. To see my life on paper, not in shadows. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou's words echoed in my mind as my pen moved. I wondered when I stopped believing myself. I didn't go back to Darnell, not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop quietly and began checking my credit reports, looking up numbers for a legal clinic, a counselor friend from the hospital. Small steps, measured. I wouldn't sacrifice my peace again to protect somebody else's name. That night, I slept in the guest room, not out of anger, and out of clarity. The sheets smelled like lavender, not his cologne. I stared at the ceiling, breathing slow, feeling something inside me shift from ache to steel. The next morning, light slipped under the door. I walked to the front hallway to get the mail, and there it was. A white envelope slid under the door. No return address. My name written in a hand I didn't recognize. I held it in my palm for a long time, feeling its weight, or its lack of it. Sometimes the truth doesn't knock, it just shows up when you're finally ready. The envelope wasn't heavy, but what it carried might change everything. The morning light cut across my desk in stiff lines, as though reminding me that time had not paused for me to catch up. I sat there staring at the envelope, hands steady now, waiting for myself to open it. My mind replayed Geneva's voice, warning me long ago. Keep your eye on the fine print, Angie. I slid the flap open and drew out its contents. My pulse wasn't racing. My eyes were calm and cold. Inside was a deed transfer form, official, notarized, decisive. My name signed at the bottom, dated 3 years prior. The house, always under my name, always my domain, now transferred under paper I never signed. That signature wasn't mine. I held it up, letting the light pass through the lines of it. Betrayal coated every word. I felt old trust crack. I stood and walked slowly to the garage, navigating past boxes and the scent of motor oil. Under a quilt lay the old file cabinet, Geneva's safe place. I pulled it free, opened the drawer, and there it was. Her folder, locked, with her careful handwriting. Only open if needed. My heart clenched. I pried it open and uncovered her secrets. Rows and columns, names, dates, addresses, loans. She had tracked transfers made in Darnell's name. Women from our church, past volunteers, widows, names next to his, decades of entries, his pattern. My throat tight. This was never about me only. It was about how many times he built his image on someone else's name. Geneva had been watching for years. A knock at the front door startled me. I tucked the folder under papers and walked to answer. Ms. Loretta stood there with a book in hand. "Good morning, Angela," she said quietly, stepping inside. "Loretta, did Geneva ever speak with you about Darnell?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She paused, expression tight. "We all knew Geneva was watching something. She didn't want to shake you. She said you'd see it when you were ready." I held her gaze. "Do you remember Miss Callahan? The one who lost her house after Darnell helped her sell it?" Loretta's eyes softened, hurt behind them. Yes, she trusted him. He convinced her it was a smart move. She ended up living with relatives after the papers changed. Her words landed heavy. My loyalty had blinded me. My silence had permitted him. She left soon after. I locked the door, walked back to my desk. I found my ledger book and began writing. Entries poured in. Names, years, amounts, loans, insurance switches. An investment I never knew existed, all under my name, all without my say. All these years, and my signature was just a formality for someone else's hustle, I whispered. I called an old friend at legal aid. Hypothetically, I said, what if a spouse forged your signature on property deeds? She guided me. I wrote down every path, every resource. Then I made photocopies of Geneva's documents. One stack for me, one to lock away. I didn't cry. I planned, focused. I pressed a post-it above my desk. "You ain't a parasite when you built the house." My phone buzzed. A text from Darnell. "I need you to sign something before the church board meets this Friday. Just some formality." I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. My lips curved into a faint, cold smile. They always think I'm still the same woman who never reads the fine print. But this time, I wasn't signing anything. I was about to sign him out. When I came into the living room that evening, I expected to see our wedding portrait still hanging in its place, the one I chose, the frame, the light, everything, because it mattered to me, but it was gone. In its place hung a new portrait. Darnell alone, in a suit, smiling into the lens. No trace of me. My throat closed. I called out, "Malik? Keisha?" But no voices answered. The quiet in that room was louder than any insult I've ever heard. I remembered how that photo had once stood for our promise: kids, family, dreams. Now it was gone, like I had never existed in that frame at all. Keisha had arranged a Zoom dinner that night for family and church friends to catch up. I logged in with camera on, hoping I'd be part of the conversation. Instead, Darnell suggested I mute and turn off video to avoid distractions. My face blinked on the screen, small among others' squares. The others spoke about giving, church projects, community work. I listened. Malik tried to speak, but Darnell cut him off. "Mom, just relax tonight." As if I were a bystander. I sat mute, camera half hidden, a ghost in my own home. My anger curled cold in my chest. This was not guest territory. This was mine. I stepped away and called Ms. Loretta. My voice was low. I told her about the photo, the Zoom. She didn't gasp. She said she'd noticed the change weeks ago when she visited. She said, "When your existence can be toggled off, it's time to show up in full force." Her tone was steady. She offered to dig for evidence, property shifts, documents. I thanked her. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I closed my eyes and went back in time to the day we hung that wedding photo. Darnell and I stood before the wall. I insisted on the frame, the lighting, the spot. I remember the pride shining in my chest as I showed it to neighbors. Our forever. That pride feels raw now. Was that memory ever mine to own? I opened my social media, hesitated, then typed, "A photo doesn't make a family, but absence speaks louder than smiles." I hit post. Within minutes, it lit up. Friends, neighbors, old faces liking, commenting, hearts. Darnell's phone buzzed beside me. I didn't look over. I didn't turn back. Silence was no longer a shield, but a statement. Late into the night, with the house quiet, I walked to the wall where the photo had been. The nails stuck out, 2 small scars. I touched them gently, imagining the image that once hung there. My phone chimed. Keisha's text. "Mom, I'm sorry. I saw them move it tonight." I stared at those few words. Tonight, I became more visible in their hiding. The wall holds the ghost of our vows. After the house quieted down, I sat alone in the study, light from the old desk lamp catching the dust in the air. I didn't even bother changing clothes. I went straight to that old desktop, still humming like it had something to say. I opened a folder labeled Family Trips. It had videos, photos, even music overlays, carefully edited. Every caption said, "Darnell Family," but I remembered booking those flights. I handled every hotel, packed the snacks, paid the insurance. Yet there I was, either out of frame or not mentioned at all. In one clip, Darnell was making a toast on a cruise deck, Malik and Keisha clapping beside him, and all I could think was, I planned that whole trip down to the sunscreen, but you'd never know it. I leaned back, shut the screen, and sat there for a minute. The pain didn't even burn anymore. It settled like dust on everything. I wasn't looking for applause. I was looking for presence, for acknowledgement. I'd been part of this story the whole time, and still, erased. I clicked over to another file, Malik's anniversary video. I remembered saving up for that surprise cruise for him and Denise. My name wasn't on the gift tag, but in the video montage, the final slide read, "A lifetime gift from Dad." My hand clenched around the mouse. I stood up. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was theft, and not just of money, but of memory, of meaning. Malik walked into the room just then, holding a glass of water. I turned to him slowly. "Do you remember that yacht trip for your anniversary?" I asked, voice even. He smiled. "Of course. One of the best weekends Denise and I ever had. Dad pulled it off nice." "Did he?" I stared. His smile faded. "Wait, what are you saying?" "I'm saying the money came from my retirement account," I said. "I didn't even get a thank you." He blinked, confused. "I thought—" "Exactly," I cut in. "You thought—" "He let you." He looked down, then quietly left the room. I didn't follow him. I picked up the mouse again, clicked print on the screenshots, the itineraries, the captions. walked down the hall to Darnell's study and pushed the door open. He didn't look up from his phone. "What now?" he muttered. I dropped the pages on his desk. "These," I said, "are all the ways you built a public image on my silence." He squinted. "Angela, don't start tonight. You're reading too much into things." I pointed at a photo from a mission trip to Belize, me organizing supplies, cut out of the final photo he posted online. "You didn't just forget me, you deleted me, on purpose." He leaned back in his chair. "You're being sensitive." "No," I said, voice cold as steel. "I'm being accurate." He didn't speak. His face, always so composed, cracked just a bit. He knew I wasn't just venting, I was documenting. I left the room, walked to the kitchen, and called Miss Loretta. Her voice came through warm and steady, like she already knew. "I found the proof," I said. "I believe you," she replied. "And I remember, I was with him at the bank once. Heard him tell the clerk not to list you on the property title. I didn't say nothing then, but I will now." I closed my eyes. That kind of clarity, it cuts and heals at the same time. "I might need you as a witness," I said. "You got me," she said. "Whenever you're ready." After the call, I sat back down and opened a fresh document. I labeled it Full Account, Angela J. Reynolds. I started dragging over video links, copies of receipts, notes from Geneva, bank statements, dates. I wasn't retreating. I was choosing where to stand. Then I opened a new window and began typing letters, one for Keisha, one for Malik, not to accuse, just to show them what I saw, what they hadn't. No emotion, no blame, just facts. When I finished, I printed them, folded them, and set them aside. I barely slept that night. My notebook stayed open on the nightstand, pen still warm in my hand. Just after sunrise, the doorbell rang. I threw on my robe and opened it. A brown package sat at my feet. No label, no return address. It was heavier than it looked. I carried it inside and sliced the tape. Inside, blueprints. Original property deeds with my name in ink. A photo album. Pages filled with moments I lived, real proof I had been there all along. No note, just truth. I held the documents, hands trembling. They thought I was fading. Instead, I just stepped forward. This box didn't arrive by accident. I sat out on the veranda, the package still open on the small table beside me. The night air brushed across my skin, cool and steady, like it knew I needed space to breathe. The box sat there like a witness, full of receipts, blueprints, truths I had almost let disappear with time. I traced the edge of a deed with my finger, read my own name over and over just to remind myself it was real. Angela Laveau, not Brown, not "Hey, miss," not a ghost. I replayed Geneva's words in my head. "You deserve to see your own life." It rang louder now than when I first read it. Every omission, every credit stolen, every time I bit my tongue at a dinner table that no longer set a place for me, it all formed a pattern, not sloppy, intentional. So I sat there, whispering my name aloud like a vow, rehearsing how I'd say it with weight, with spine, no shaking voice, no apology. By morning, Keisha texted. She said there was a church gala that night. Darnell was getting some lifetime leadership plaque. I almost laughed. Of course he was. She added, "It'd be good if you were there." I stared at the message for a while. Going meant standing in a room full of people who had already decided who I was. Not going meant they'd keep deciding without me. I texted back, "I'll be there." I pulled out a deep green dress I hadn't worn since Malik's graduation. Long sleeves, V-neck. Just enough shimmer to catch light, but not beg for it. The color felt like something new, bold, alive, like a leaf about to unfurl. That night, I stood in front of the church hall mirror, folder clutched under my arm, and told myself one last time, "You're not background. You built this stage too." Then I walked in. The lights inside were low, the music soft, all the usual pleasantries in full swing. I spotted Darnell shaking hands, smiling like his face didn't know what it had erased. Keisha waved from across the room. Malik nodded toward me. He looked nervous. I walked to the reserved table, sat, and waited. The MC took the mic. And now, we'd like to welcome Angela Brown. A polite laugh rolled through the crowd like warm butter, slow, sticky, hard to scrub off. My jaw tightened. That wasn't my name. Again. The first time they called me Mrs. Brown, I was barely 24, and it was the bank teller looking past me to speak to Darnell. Now it was a church MC doing the same thing in front of dozens. Decades later, and still invisible. I didn't correct them, not yet. I sat still, folder still warm from my palm, and waited. The mingling hours started. A man in a tan suit holding a glass of red punch walked up behind me. "Miss," he said, tapping my arm, "could you grab a few more napkins and bring another tray of those meatballs?" I turned slowly. "I do more than pass drinks," I said. "I built half this room." He blinked, confused, then flushed. A few heads turned. Keisha froze mid-conversation. Darnell looked up from across the room, face paling as he realized what had just happened. I didn't linger. I turned and walked toward the podium. The MC was halfway through a sentence when I stepped up. I tapped the mic. "Excuse me," I said. "I was invited as a guest, not a side character. Let my name be said correctly. Angela Laveau." The room hushed. I lifted the folder, opened it, pulled out one of the deeds. "This is my name. This home, this foundation, this family. My name has been on it the whole time, even when you tried to erase it." I held up a photo of our first house. "This, paid with my pension fund, my work, my sacrifice." Gasps. Some heads nodded. A few murmurs. Darnell stood halfway, eyes wide. His expression wasn't anger, it was fear, of what came next, of what I had found. I closed the folder, turned from the podium, and stepped down. A single clap echoed, then another, then a wave. Someone called out, "Angela!" Then another joined in. "Angela!" I didn't cry. Not tonight. I lifted my chin, walked back to my seat. Darnell's smile had vanished. Malik moved toward me, slow and steady, like he was seeing me again for the first time. They, from now on, would see me standing, never shrinking. Her name echoed louder than their denial. I entered the ballroom under bright lights, emerald green hugging my frame, folder firm in my grip. Whispers swirled around me, eyes followed me as I crossed the floor. Keisha stood by the side and gave me a slight nod. Malik brushed my arm, steady, real. The MC's voice cut through the murmur, listing honorees, awarding accolades. I drew in a breath, squared my shoulders. They think I'll fumble. They never saw me waiting for this night. When my turn came, I stepped up without hesitation. I unfolded the pages, expecting my voice, my truth. But the speech I held praised Darnell, omitted my work, credited him for what I built. My heart squeezed. I read, voice steady at first, then cracking. The audience applauded each false line. I forced a smile, finished, then walked off the stage amidst polite claps and quiet murmurs. Backstage, the lights were dim and harsh. I found Darnell's assistant standing against a wall, clutching scripts. "Who gave you that?" I asked. She trembled. "He said to swap," she stammered. I tore the script from her hands and scanned it. Then I saw the insurance change document. Beneficiary switched to Talia, notarized, weeks ago. My name erased from legacy, replaced. I felt betrayal coil in my chest. "You don't just steal my name, you steal my legacy," I murmured. Malik rushed in, eyes wide. "Mom?" He looked at the papers. I had no idea. Keisha appeared beside him, tears in her eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry. I see now." Ms. Loretta followed, holding an envelope. "I saved copies," she said. "Old contracts, before he altered them." Her calm certainty steadied me. I straightened, stepping back toward the hall. "I'm going back out there," I said, voice firm. I crossed the curtain, returned to the podium. The MC tried to protest. I tapped the mic. Silence fell. "I was given a speech that wasn't mine," I said. "You applauded lies. Now hear truth." I opened the folder, raised the real documents, showed the forged insurance, the deeds, the testimonies. "My name is Angela Laveau. I built these programs, I funded these trips. My life insurance, our children's future, was changed without my consent." Gasps. Heads turned. Some stood. Others looked at Darnell, who sat frozen, his color drained. I closed the folder. I looked straight at him. Your legacy was built on my silence. Tonight, silence ends. I stepped down. The crowd erupted. Angela! Angela! They chanted. I descended the stairs slowly. Malik met me mid-step, grabbed my hand. Keisha walked beside me. Ms. Loretta's eyes glinted with quiet pride. Darnell remained seated, his confident grin gone, hollow under the spotlight. Tonight, I didn't just speak. I was heard. His legacy will tremble before mine. The moment my feet crossed the foyer, I heard it, my name bouncing off marble, carried on waves of clapping that wouldn't quit. Angela, Angela. Some folks chanted it like a hymn, others like a war cry. I stood there, folder still warm in my hands, heart banging so loud I could barely hear the MC scrambling for order. Didn't matter, they weren't listening to him anymore. Darnell rose slowly from his seat, eyes darting like a man trying to count how many exits the room had. I saw the shift, his mask slipping, and as people stood up, pulling out their phones, turning their cameras toward him, it hit me. Sometimes the loudest power is silence. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that exposes, that breaks rooms open. I didn't move. I didn't have to. That room belonged to the truth now. Then, she walked up. Talia, in stilettos and satin, her steps rehearsed. She reached for the mic like she had a right. I was never a secret, she started. Her voice was honeyed, sweet, but a little too practiced. Angela knew about me. She just didn't want to share the stage. She paused, glanced in my direction. I looked straight back, didn't blink, and her smile faltered. Just for a second. I sacrificed too, she went on, shoulders back, voice louder. I stood beside Darnell while she chose to stay behind. What you saw tonight, that's bitterness, not bravery. People shifted in their seats. Some nodded, unsure. Others frowned, confused. And inside, I thought, you never had to hide your name. I always had to fight for mine. Before the tension could boil over, a voice boomed from the front. That's enough. It was Reverend Briggs, gray suit, red stole, and presence you could feel in your bones. He walked to the stage like it was built for him. Let's get something straight, he said, calm but thunderous. This woman, Angela Laveau, has fed our hungry, nursed our sick, prayed over our dead, and built this community while some of y'all were too busy building lies. Gasps, whispers, then cheers. She doesn't need to share a stage with anybody. She built the stage. You could see it, the pivot, like wind shifting a whole room. People looked at Darnell now like he was a suit full of sawdust. He didn't speak, couldn't. And in that space, I felt something old fall away. Malik found me just off to the side, tears already slipping down his cheeks. Mom, he said, voice small. I should have spoken up years ago. I'm sorry. He reached for my hand. I let him. Keisha followed, face flushed, her arms wrapping around me without a word at first. Then a whisper, soft but firm. We'll fix it, together. I held them both, my babies, grown but still mine. Pain filled my chest, not just from their absence, but from how long I'd waited to hear those words. And I forgave them, not for their sake, but for my own. Later, when the room cleared and quiet settled, I stepped back onto the stage, empty now, just me and the green folder. I picked it up slowly, held it tight. Then I walked out into the courtyard. Night air hit my face like fresh water. I sat on a bench under a flickering street lamp, cracked it open again. Deeds, insurance filings, witness letters, names corrected, mine. This fight was never about making Darnell see me. It was about making sure I didn't disappear. I looked out past the parking lot, past the quiet street, and I knew what came next. Lawyers, letters, steps toward reclaiming all that was mine. I didn't need revenge. I needed my name back. And now, I was gonna get it. By the time I made it home, morning had started to stir. Not bright yet, but enough light to see my reflection in the glass as I walked past the entryway mirror. In my office, I sat down at the desk, opened my phone. Messages kept coming in. Church folks, former patients, old friends. They saw me now. I reached for my notebook, opened to a blank page, wrote across the top, "My life, written by me." Tonight, they clapped for my name. Tomorrow, they'll respect it. This isn't the end. It's the rebirth of my story.